Okay, welcome everybody. As usual, I see many familiar faces and quite a few newcomers as well. Democrats Abroad is happy to welcome you to our 7th Kafeneion. It's a speaker and discussion series that we are organizing to better understand issues facing American voters and to stay in touch with the DAGR community. I'm Sarah Jane Kidleoni, and I'm coordinating the Kafeneion, and I vote from Texas. And I would like everyone to put your name and state that you vote from in the chat box. And of course, any questions that you have during the presentation as well. We have many of our executive committee collaborators online, and they all help to bring this program to you. So if you want to raise your hands for some recognition. Yay. And we have our chair, Stacy, who is leading DAGR with great aplomb during these trying times. I just want to start by saying a few words. The first Earth Day was April 22nd, 1970, and it's sometimes said to have marked the beginning of the modern environmental movement, and it even predates the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And it was a revelation to many because it raised a lot of consciousness about environmental issues, and it brought people together who had previously been working separately on issues. And the first Earth Day in 1970, there were 20 million Americans that took to the streets, parks, and auditoriums to demonstrate. So since 1970, many important environmental events have happened on Earth Day, including the signing of the Paris Agreement. And this year's theme is Invest in Our Planet. According to Kathleen Rogers, the president of earthday.org, we need to build a global citizenry fluent in the concept of climate change and inspired by environmental education to act in defense of the planet. And Democrats Abroad Greece is doing just that. This past fall, we had a very well-attended presentation about the processes and politics of environmental governance, especially in relation to combating climate change. And in our discussion, one of the notable outcomes was everybody's wish to do something. There was, to have a call to actions, like what can I do? So with Earth Day around the corner, we want to address this question. And since we're in Greece, I thought we could start with Socrates, who said, the secret of change is to focus all of our energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Lefteris Arapakis, who is a brilliant representative of that new here in Greece. Lefteris comes from a long line of Greek professional fishermen, and during the Greek economic crisis, he co-founded Eneleia, an organization with a vision to make the marine ecosystem sustainable. Eneleia has created the first school for professional fishing in Greece and 2 wide-scale plastic cleanups. This Mediterranean cleanup is one of the top 5 marine plastic cleanups in Europe. He has been awarded the United Nations European Young Champion of the Earth by the UN and the Ambassador for the Mediterranean Coast by UNEP-MAP for 2021-2022. And Lefteris, you have the floor. But you have to unmute, yeah.
Thank you very much for your kind words, the introduction, and then the invitation. It's really an honor to be able to be with you today. I'm really excited to be part of this discussion. So many greetings from Cyclot. I'm currently here. We have some cleanup actions in this fishing island of Kafeneion. So we are kind of now preparing the activities with the fishing communities. I was thinking of what I could share with you today, and I thought that maybe the most valuable contribution that I can bring is be authentic and talk about my own story and how can everybody engage with sustainability and fighting climate change. So if you're okay, I will try to share the screen to be able to show you also some pictures of our work. Okay, can you see the screen?
Mhm.
Okay, great. So we founded an Aliyah around 5.5 years ago, and Aliyah in Greek means together with a fisherman. And the reason we started was that unemployment had exploded in 29%. And I really felt that, I had to do something about that. I had also job offers to go outside of the country. Half of my friends fled, but I felt that I had first to, try my best and then flee the country. And at this period of time, I was discussing with my father and my family. They are professional fishermen for like 5 generations. So my father was complaining, and I think that's typical fisherman behavior, that they couldn't find enough personnel for the fishing boats. And then I told him to just, go to the fishing school and get some people from there. And he mentioned that there is no fishing school in Greece. So I told that to a friend, and we decided to launch the first school for fishing in the country. And we did it. We started, we have trained more than 130 unemployed people, creating more than 100 jobs in the country. But the point is that I had no idea about fishing. I think probably even today I'm the worst fisherman in the country. I studied economics, so I was coming from a different background of skill set. So when we were creating the curriculum for the fishing, we went on fishing trips to see the whole process. And then on our first trip, which was in the islands of Cyclades again, you can see actually Naxos there in the distance. And we went for fishing. And, we were in this magnificent, island territory with white blue houses and amazing picturesque coastline. And then I was really shocked to see that the fishermen were collecting with their nets from the sea, not only fish, but also plastic, a lot of it. And I still remember that in the first catch, we got like this Coca-Cola can, which was so old, it had expired back in 1987. So that can was like 30 years in the sea. And then the fisherman took it from my hand and threw it back in the sea. And he told me, Lefteris, marine litter is not our problem. But over the next days, we collected from the sea plastic bottles, plastic bags, old fishing nets, even a refrigerator. And the fishermen, they were just throwing it back to the sea. That was normal for them. So when we returned from the fishing trips, we started reading about marine plastic pollution. And then we read that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the sea. So we realized that there is no use getting there more fishermen if we don't do something about it. So we decided to act, and we started with a small pilot from our local port in Piraeus. And then we trained some fishermen, just my father, some of his friends, to bring back the plastic they were getting in their net. And they did it. And they started bringing back vast amounts of plastic, much more than anyone could imagine from a big tuna. And then we studied the plastic, and we saw that a lot of it wasn't coming only from Greece, but from other Mediterranean countries as well. We got beer cans from Turkey. We got soda drinks from Egypt. We got a TV from Spain and the radio installation from Italy. So we realized that in our case, we're not facing marine plastic pollution is not like a national challenge, but rather a Mediterranean, called the Mediterranean cleanup. And with that project, over the last 2.5 years, we are training fishing communities in the Mediterranean Sea. We started with one port in one country, and now we are working in 2 countries, all over Greece and in the northern part of Italy. We have presence in 30 fishing ports, and we are working with more than 300 professional fishing boats. Currently, there are more than 1,200 fishers that are fishing for plastic every day. To speak with numbers, we are collecting about 5,000 kilos of plastic. To give you an understanding, whatever you see in that picture, everything, the pipes, the mountain of plastic behind, everything that you see here is 5,000 kilos of plastic, around 10,000 pounds. So this is how much the fishing communities are collecting from the Mediterranean Sea weekly. And actually all of that you see is our plastic. The plastic that we collect is a lot of plastic bags, but also weird objects like motorbikes. This motorbike was fished 2 miles away, far away from Andros Island. But literally anything you can imagine, we find it in the sea. Children toys, full boats, like this is the same boat on the left and on the right. We fished it around Glyfada, deep inside of Glyfada Sea. And then we turn it into a piece of art and we donate it back to the fishing community that fished that boat. So part of the problem into part of the solution. And it will be working. But apart from cleanup the fishing community, the last years we are also organizing civil society cleanup. So we got many requests from the citizens of the island of Ithaca to perform a cleanup there. In Ithaca, there was an old fish farm that became bankrupt more than 10 years ago. And then after they became bankrupt, they just threw their old equipment there. We are speaking about thousands and thousands of kilos of plastic in the island. And then a couple of years back, there's this typhoon coming to the island and it's throwing the plastic everywhere. So there is plastic pipes in the sea. There is microplastic in the coast. There are fishing nets everywhere. It's dangerous. No fish grows there. No plants grow there. It's crazy. So we went to the island and in collaboration with health cities and ghost divers, we cleaned it up. In some places, the plastic was so much, it was actually on our knees in terms of level. It was really, really, really fun. But we cleaned it. Until today, we have collected more than 250,000 kilos of plastic from the sea. That's around 500,000 pounds of plastic. And then we came to a realization, like cleaning plastic from the sea is not solving the problem. We are actually treating the symptoms. We're not treating the cause. It's like we're on a fishing boat, okay, and there is this hole and there's water coming in the boat. What we are doing is like we have a bucket and we put the water out of the boat. So that activity buys us some time, but it's not solving the problem. Water is still entering the boat. So in order to solve this plastic pollution challenge, we need to prevent plastic from entering the sea. From our activities, we realized that more than 20 to 25% of the total marine plastic pollution is not plastic straws, is not plastic bottles, is lost fishing equipment, fishing nets, and fishing ropes. This is the most common plastic we find in the Mediterranean. And also, according to various other studies, is the most common plastic globally. But not only is the most common plastic, it's also one of the strongest. It takes 6 centuries to break down to microplastics. And not only that, for all of this period of time, these fishing nets keep on fishing. So they catch fish, they catch turtles, they catch dolphins. And many times when we collect it from the sea, it's full of skeletons of this marine organization. So in order to prevent that phenomenon, we are working with all of these fishing communities of Greece and Italy, and we collect the used fishing equipment to prevent it from entering the sea and becoming ghostier. And we collect thousands, but here's the question, like, what are we doing with all of that plastic? So Greece didn't really have a solution, and we are second worst in the EU in terms of plastic recycling. But what we did is gradually we created collaborations with recycling companies. So now recycling company is giving us a container and put the plastic into that container. And when the container is full, it's sorted. And we have currently 4 upcycling streams. and then they turn into jackets and shoes. We sent in the Netherlands, and then we upcycle it into products that turn it into pellets, into little balls of plastic. And this plastic can be melted and can create new products, such as surfboards. So this is how the plastic boats look like when they are turned into jackets, and the fishing nets when they are turned into socks. So these are some women design and some men design. And many people claim that the women design is much better. So we have many collaborations to make this happen, mainly with that are making this. Lately, we developed a memorandum of understanding with the Greek government. So we provide them with data on the plastic that we collect from the sea without any fee, to make them make decisions based on data, to understand what's actually in the sea. And our work has been featured in many local and international media. So for our work in the Mediterranean Sea, last year we got the award of Young Champions of the Earth from the United Nations, which is the highest environmental honor that the UN gives to people under 30 years old. And a few months ago, we got the award of from UNEP-MAP, the Mediterranean Action Plan of the United Nations, as ambassador for the Mediterranean Coast. And with the support of the United Nations, we met with many people around the globe, like Prince William's here. And with their guidance, we started thinking outside of the box. So we thought, we are not doing rocket science. We are working with the fishing communities. And the most plastic in the oceans is coming from them. So what if we replicate our model here from the Mediterranean Sea around the world? So a few months ago, we started the pilot activity in Kenya. In Kenya, because there is the headquarters of United Nations Environment Program in Nairobi, so they could network us with local partners, but also because Kenya is one of the most developed countries in Africa regarding recycling. So we started there, and we started training fishing communities. Now we are working with more than the coast of Kenya, and these fishing communities are getting paid to stop fishing, so to protect the fishing stock also reproduce. And instead of fishing, they take their little canoes and they collect plastic from the Indian Ocean. And they are getting paid for that much more than they would get paid for the fish they get. And then this plastic is sorted, and then it's used to make building material. And with this building material, we are building houses back for the local community. So this is our story in Analia. It started like 5.5 years ago, and we are doing this cleanup the last 2.5 years. And I haven't really realized how fast it grew. And we just started with 1 port and 2 fishing boats, and now we are working with thousands of fishermen around the world. And maybe my key message would be that if a young person from a fishing family of Piraeus can motivate thousands of fishermen to change their mindset and start collecting plastic from the sea and becoming one of the biggest plastic cleanup movements in Europe, then I believe that each and every one of you can motivate and inspire their own communities to take action against climate change. Maybe points to share on that direction. So the first thing would be to listen to your communities. Probably the communities already know what is needed, but they don't know how to solve that because they are too much involved into the day-to-day life. Like when I saw the fishermen that they were collecting plastic in their nets and throwing it back, for me it was a shock, but for them it was just another day at work. So I believe the first activity is to listen to the communities, and the second is launch, support, or empower a community initiative. It can be an NGO, that you can start or support or mentor. It can be a social enterprise. It can be anything that comes from the community. And for me, something that really helped me was mentoring that I received. Mentoring on decision making, mentoring on maintaining my culture and values into the organization. So that's something that really empowered me and Analia to be able to continue our operations. And maybe the third thing would be lead by your own example. To create some difference, like physical communities don't see me with single-use plastic bottles or cups. You know, I have my reusable one and my reusable bags. And politicians, NGOs, and international organizations, they don't just listen to what I say because I speak nicely or fancy or have nice data. They listen to us because they see the work we do in the field. So I think maybe that's the most important initiative, like lead by example, and to actually create real change, systemic change at the global level. I believe advocacy is the strongest initiative. And we see that now with the United Nations 1 month ago in Nairobi at the UNEA, 175 countries, including the United States for the first time ever, have signed an agreement against plastic pollution. And that's the biggest agreement regarding environmental initiatives since 1989, where all the countries signed for the ozone layer. So this was made possible through advocacy initiatives, and hopefully through that agreement in the next years and decades, we'll not speak about the plastic pollution anymore, like we don't speak about the ozone anymore. So this is what I wanted to share with you today. This is my story. And this is how I experienced this journey so far. And thank you again for the invitation. And I'm sorry if I was too boring or tiring in that intervention.
Thank you, Leftery. You were anything but boring. I think it's really impressive the way you've scaled up your efforts. And I know that people are going to have a lot of questions for you, but we're going to hold off on those. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and then we're going to have discussion. Our next speaker is another young face of change and innovation, Theo Anastasato. Theo was born to Austrian and Greek parents in New York, and he studied fashion design at the illustrious Central St. Martin's in UK before going on to work with Vivienne Westwood in London and Tokyo. He then moved to work with the Inditex group in Spain, which includes many known brands like Zara, Massimo Dutti, just to name a few. And he's also the talent behind the brand Intellectual Leisure, which was created in 2020. And as he says, as much as a state of mind as a clothing and design brand. They conceive their ideas, source their materials, and manufacture their products within the borders of the Mediterranean basin. Always respectful of Mother Nature, his collections do not follow a conventional seasonal cycle, but are rather the product of product-based natural evolution. He currently lives between the island of Mykonos, Athens, and I think I should add Tinos, where he conducts his work. Theo?
Hi, everybody. I too want to thank you and just say I'm super excited to be here and to be able to speak to you. Sarah Jane offered for me to do this presentation today, and I also thought about how could I present what I do to you in a way that makes sense. As we've just heard from Lefteris, who's sort of gone from local to global, I think my story is the other way around, where I've gone from global to local and sort of scaled things down and become the master of my own projects in the sense that I felt what I was doing before and how I was working before didn't really correspond to my moral compass. And so I'm also going to share my screen with you, show you my presentation that I've prepared. So I want to include a few voices. I want to share a few voices before I start going into my personal work. Because just reading the papers the other day, a few days ago, this article popped up on The Guardian, And it was talking about why eco-conscious fashion brands can continue to increase their emissions and how it might be misleading to think that you're buying into sustainable fashion when that's actually not the truth. What really struck me here is that fashion accounts for 10% of the world's carbon emissions and is the second most polluting industry in the world. So this concerns all of us because we all wear clothes and we all make that decision of buying clothes for ourselves, whether it is for function or adornment. Clothes have become so readily available and are really cheap when they maybe shouldn't be. And I'm especially talking about these big fashion brands that I also used to work for. So that's a scary fact. And the way that it might sound that they're actually sustainable or working sustainably is that in this article, it actually talks about how these companies are allowed to compare their CO2 emissions to the actual revenue and the growth. So, you know, the more they produce, it looks like the CO2 emissions are shrinking when they're actually also growing. So that then suddenly sounds sustainable when it isn't. And that is just one level. When production, you know, happens all over the world, there's depletion of natural resources and working conditions for a lot of employees Far East are also not always great. And I know that from my own experience working with a lot of suppliers on an international level. The second voice is from an artisan, a natural dyer and textile and fiber artist of Malian descent, who is also French. His name is Abubakar Fafana. There's a post, he has a beautiful Instagram feed. And there's a post here that was also very interesting for me because it talks about how his country of origin, Mali, for example, produces a lot of cotton, as incidentally we in Greece do too, but all of this cotton essentially gets exported as raw material and is used to produce cheap clothes for the global market. So none of it is able to stay in the country really and doesn't really contribute to the economy in that sense that people can then turn it into textile, into fashion. That industry there does not really exist. Later, a lot of these brands, and Zara, who I worked for, is also part of that group, can then dump dead stock and used clothes back into the country. It's then sold by weight and often ends up in third world countries in the market, and it's then available as very cheap clothes. So the cotton that was originally grown in the field in Mali and pesticides were used and, you know, the earth was depleted, it's turned into material that is produced for clothing for the West, is then again dumped into the market and undermines the economy there in the sense that even people who would try and produce there cannot compete with the prices of the clothes that land back in the market. So it's sort of this vicious cycle that isn't really helping anybody and doing a lot of damage there. The third voice that I want to share with you is from my previous employer, Vivian Westwood, who has a very strong opinion and a very contradictory and almost hypocritical opinion about fashion, as she's a high fashion designer. So she's considered one of those, you know, expensive brands, world-renowned, Paris Fashion Week, etc. And she has this phrase that always really inspired me. I mean, I love the fact that she produces these clothes and then would also at the same time say, have the slogan printed on her t-shirts and clothes that said, buy less, choose well, make it last. And it's sort of ironic when you think that here's somebody advertising clothes and having a collection and selling a lot of accessories and handbags that are made all over the world, and sort of at the same time says, well, don't buy it, essentially. And I'm gonna sort of play this video so you get a little bit of a feeling of her character.
For some reason, suddenly, I realized only this year that people are using the word capitalism all the time. I never thought of using the word capitalism because we were so frightened of mentioning capitalism 10 years ago. People would just see you as an extremist or a Marxist, and I'm not. Russell Brand said the other day that we can only solve the problem of the environment when we dismantle capitalism. And so this is the enemy. And the point is that it's the end of capitalism because the fossil fuel is running out. And because we're at the end, our leaders are so extreme. They've gone to extremes. This is why we've got this terrible austerity. If you read in here, you'll realize how austerity is just part of the covering up of the Ponzi scheme, and it doesn't really do anything. They might as well print more money, because that's what these central banks are allowed to do. They're private banks, they print money. Clothes should cost an awful lot more than they do, because in fact they're really subsidized. And one of the ways in which my clothes are subsidized, my core collection, is that we have to do all this periphery stuff to support it. Small leather goods, sunglasses. Unfortunately, I never had a success with my perfume. I hope one day to be able to do perfumes I like, except the first one, which was really good, and the rest was terrible. Don't buy it. Food should be dearer. A chicken, I think you can still buy a cooked chicken for £2. It's dreadful, because the world is run on debt, and that's why everything costs less than it should. Anyway, but you do need clothes, and so they're expensive clothes. We try to make sure that they're value for money. I've got something, we're opening a shop in Paris. I haven't written this in England yet, but I've certainly put it on invitations and T-shirts and things. And on the door of that shop in Paris, because we're doing the decoration new, it will definitely have buy less, choose well, make it last. Because we don't need so much.
So that just gives you an idea of, Lefteris was talking about mentorship. And I think Vivian was definitely a mentor for me, in that sense that what she said now started to resonate with me, and it sort of gave me that moral compass in working within the fashion industry, which is a sector that really also reflects the affluence of a society. Fashion and how much time is spent discussing it, writing about it, Fashion Week, how much money is spent on buying clothes to adorn yourself. So I worked for her, and I left Vivienne Westwood after 7 years to work for a company called Inditex, as Sarah Jane mentioned. It's one of the biggest fashion retailers in the world. And I went there naively thinking, okay, maybe something was going to happen there. Perhaps these were modern people, that knew how to implement sustainability in a global sense. And I was going to be able to learn something there and move things forward really quickly. And, earn decent money. So what it looks like basically is this is, the place where it is in Spain. It's this huge industrial polígono, as they say, this huge complex of buildings. And really it's just very sterile. So it's a big office with a lot of people looking at screens, and a lot of people packing boxes, and a lot of people, working on a conveyor belt to produce clothes for the world, and everything's really efficient and shipped around. And there was the subject of sustainability indeed, but I became frustrated there after a very short amount of time. After 3 years, I felt like I was actually doing more damage by working there than doing good, because I felt that the sustainability issue, again, was literally just ticking little boxes, doing the minimum required, calling something a green piece of clothing when it only had, 1% of recycled fiber in it. And we were talking about sustainable, eco-friendly bio cotton, when that's a very difficult subject, because cotton, it's very difficult to grow it biologically in terms of using pesticide. It needs a lot of water. Even biological cotton uses sort of bio-friendly pesticides, which still kill a lot of insects. So, when we're talking about biological cotton, it's very difficult to actually really, make it biological. So I was encountering a lot of contradictions, and I was sort of becoming a little bit frustrated. And I said to myself, right, what can I do to work in this environment and not do any damage? So I'm like, well, I'll probably have to try and control everything myself. Okay, so I went from this that you can see here, all this super high-tech computer screens, markets, sending stuff all over the place, to growing my hair out and going to Greek island and start dyeing with plants. I literally stopped working. I had the chance to move to Greece because my father had a house there, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to this house, I'm gonna reorient. So I slowly started by just dipping into the local culture of Mykonos, which has a history of weaving. I started weaving myself. I started spinning yarns. I started, from the beginning, from the origins of tracing, from sitting in an office, designing on a screen, going all the way back to understanding how can I make a yarn you know, how can I make yarn from a sheep or whatever it is, spin it, how can I dye it, how can that become cloth, how can that become clothes? And that led to several different projects that connected me with my community, where I became an arts teacher suddenly, and I started teaching these classes in a local monastery with a group of people who were really in need of coming together and connecting through making things with your hands again, like I was, you know, in this need of like sort of working and exchanging myself with my community. And this became an incredibly rich experience for me. I started giving dye workshops also, and this is how I met Sarah Jane, because she actually came to one of my workshops at the house where we're doing dyeing and screen printing with a friend. And this in change led to me looking at my environment very closely, trying to focus only on what I could produce with what was immediately around me. So I didn't have to go far. I didn't have to go for research trips to Tokyo, shopping in Paris to buy things that we would knock off in the office and reproduce cheaper. I was literally forced to, or would force myself to try and see what's available here. Now, Greece has a very rich textile industry and a rich textile history also. Like I said earlier, we produce our own cotton here, which we're the biggest cotton producer in Europe. Again, most of it is exported as raw material to Turkey and to Germany, where it's turned into yarns and then sold back to us, or the finished garment is sold back to us. But that's, there's still a lot of people who knit and sew here. So I was able to do that, which is really great, which maybe in Austria, where my mom is, you know, I wouldn't be able to do that on that level. So I'm like, okay, I have all these suppliers here that I could work with. So I started looking into making my own company and giving it a name, you know, and sort of materializing this concept more that I had, which ended up being this project called Intellectual Leisure, which basically is the name of my brand. But to break it down a little bit, or the idea behind it, because it sounds like a little crazy, is us in Greece catering to tourism so much, you know, there is this concept of fashion being resort wear. Fashion can be many things, you know, pret-a-porter, couture. But in Greece, resort wear is a theme. I don't know if you're familiar with the term. That's basically clothes that are sold in resorts, in holiday places. Easy breezy clothes that people buy typically when they go on holiday and they find it there because it's nice to wear on the beach, or it's nice to wear on the skiing slope. It's usually connected to the place it is. And being a place of holiday, you know, most fashion that's produced in Greece is considered resort wear. So I thought, resort wear, that's such a weird concept. You know, I want something a little bit more brainy. I want people to think about it. So think about their actions, think about what they're doing, educate themselves a little bit. So I started off with this idea because something cerebral, intellectual. So I call it intellectual leisure, because leisure is, you know, your spare time, your holiday time. But why not just, instead of switching off, use your brain a little bit and like tap into the place you're going to. So really, it is an interpretation of you know, the situation we have here in Greece, fashion, especially fashion in Greece. So the second point then was to work only with local materials, to be able to say this is made in Greece, not to stick the Greek flag on it, but to be able to say, no, listen, hey, that there's Greek cotton. There is a very rich history of, you know, culture and the arts that inspires me personally. Like one example would be in the right-hand corner, you can see this sweater, which is, you know, that's in a pattern that comes from the Greek amphors that is then knitted into a sweater. Produced in Athens and Peristeri. There's my suppliers here who are like working on this huge dress that I did, which was this project for dressing a statue in the Pedion to Arios Park. So it ended up being this 6-meter long dress that was actually then shot for Vogue magazine, which was a really, you know, big honor for me. But so this comes from this idea of the amphors. I'm looking at my own roots, right? Because I'm half Greek. So it was important for me to include that, to discover the culture and the society here, and to make that part of my language and my collection. So you can see that sort of naval denim costume here, and then the Greek camouflage t-shirt that also became part of the collection, because it's sort of decoding Greek identity, masculinity in Greece, and certain codes that are used in fashion that represent the male. And then there's me here also just literally dyeing t-shirts made from Greek cotton with pomegranate peel that I'm washing in the sea in Mykonos. So it's a very personal approach, and it is something that I can do with my own hands. It's limited in that sense, and that's what I want it to be. I don't want this to be something that can just fly off the shelves for €5 a pop. So this is my own personal project, sort of like what all this orientation time condensed into. Here's an example because of today's subject. I chose this example. This is from my collection too. This is a print I worked on that became my swimwear pattern, which references Greek mythology and plastic pollution that Lefteris was talking about that's floating around in the sea. So there's these mythological sea creatures that I've taken again from ancient Greek drawings, from pots, but I've added modern plastic pollution mythology, like that turtle that got caught in the six-pack ring, and grew a waste, which we've seen in newspapers, and we've seen the albatross that ate the plastic bottle caps and died. So there's sort of this modern horrifying images of plastic pollution mixed with these ancient symbols, and I've printed them on a swimwear fabric that was made from recycled fiber. That also, I'm not sure it's the particular yarn that Lefteris works with, but it is a yarn that is made from this plastic pollution. Then this would be a photographic campaign that I did that sort of reflects this concept of the other side of things, because these two images were taken in Mykonos. This is my swimwear, and photographed on people who live on the island, so they're not really fashion models, they're just people I know. And the left image shows the depleted water reservoir, that one of the two that we have, that really went completely empty this summer because of just overuse of resources on the island. We can't really cater to all these people who come. But I don't want to be negative or like point my finger. I'm just saying this is part of our reality, right? So I prefer to show that side also, because that's something I can work with because it's there. And so I choose that as my background because that's a side to the island and an effect of tourism that people don't necessarily see every day, because they're used to those beautiful beaches and parties and some guy playing the saxophone in Hora, right, at this great bar. But then actually there's another side, and then there's another side. There's a rubbish dump, on the north side of the island that's really like crazy. It's just like all this garbage that people, and it has, ironically, that typically has that sign of like, please don't leave your rubbish here, and it's like a massive mound of garbage. And it's like my secret little spot that I discovered. And I'm like, no, I want to feature that. It's not beautiful, but it is part of my reality. It's part of the island. And I want to use it as my backdrop, like I would as well a beautiful beach, that I like to go to, and I'll take pictures there too. This is another example of a print I worked on, showing just dance moves of, say, Bekiko, a Greek dance, but that's sort of, again, the cultural part, the Greek part that comes in. Again, Greece produces silk, in the north. There's a long history of silk production, so I'm lucky to be able to work with that as a resource, and I'm super excited about this project, and which will now culminate in this shop that I'm opening in Tinos, that I quickly want to talk about, because it's sort of like this journey over the past 3 years has taken me to Tinos, and the space I found where I can now really like exhibit and present my work to people. And this is happening, and it's super exciting. And I just want to close my little talk about my work with the shop, because it's sort of that bottleneck where everything comes together. And I've talked earlier about how important it is to me to be local. So Mykonos was one source of inspiration, but as I'm moving to Tinos, I find that what's going on here provides a different source of inspiration, where the tradition of the church and the pilgrimage to the church in Tinos, which is a very important place of worship in Greece, is a major source of inspiration, in the sense that we have collected antique ex-votos and turned them into jewelry pieces. And I also incorporated, I especially chose these two images with the fishing nets because I collected them on the beach. And like I said earlier, materials and places that I used in my work, I would use a silk background, but I'm happy to use this plastic garbage that I find on the beach too, because it's just another, like I incorporate that in my weaving as a fancy yarn, because it's just something that is here. Like I'm dyeing a wool yarn that I made myself with pomegranate peel or pine bark from the island, as much as I would use the plastic yarn. Not necessarily, of course, it's great that I'm upcycling it also, but in such minute quantities that it doesn't make as big a difference as Lefteris's work, but I'm including it because it is there on the beach, because I can find it, because I can pick it up and I can use it in a way, you know, instead of just feeling depressed by it. It's just become part of my environment. So, you know, I'm showing these two examples. These are these ex votos that have become pins that incorporate a little bit of this plastic garbage, where I'm working on this book that is sort of like an homage to all this forged iron work that you find on the island, these doors, because that's in the architecture here, that's in my environment. The floor, the beautiful mosaico, the terrazzo floor, it will become part of the color palette of the shop, will become part of the prints. And finally, the name Sosma is a name, it's a Greek word that comes from the perikyklosi and the I don't know how to describe that, the peripheral, the belting. The root of the word comes from belt. So it's belting, and it's a yarn in Orthodox custom. It's a yarn that's spun around the church. It's the perimeter of the church that you spin this yarn around, and it is dipped through wax and then, you know, rolled up into a little ball, and that in itself becomes an ex voto, becomes a lucky totem, a holy little, you know, sacred little piece that you keep. So this idea of the Odyssey, the idea of a yarn being spun, the idea of like coming full circle, circling in your environment, you know, I chose that word for the shop because it's a very important part of my work is sort of bringing things together that are around me, continuing with the history that is here, adding my hand to it, sort of taking over a little bit and like adding my thing to it, and not really trying to go global with that, because I know that I want to be resourceful with what I do. And so I want to end this talk in a little list that I've prepared for people who are wondering what they can do in terms of fashion and sustainability, because for me, those two words are contradictory, but of course there's ways of individuals being able to contribute. And so I hope Sarah Jane can make this available for people who are interested to download, or you can take a screenshot, but I'm just going to quickly go through that list of how we can make a change with clothes. And that would certainly be the clothes that you have, keep them as long as you can, extend their life cycle, make, do, and mend. That's something that comes from the post-war years in the UK. That was a big slogan, a campaign, make, do, and mend, meaning hang on to your clothes as long as you can, and, you know, learn how to fix them, learn how to mend them instead of throwing them away. Now, you can do that in a way that mending actually becomes an embellishment, like the Japanese do. There's an art form called boro, which is sort of like clothes that are made up entirely out of patches of other clothes, which were cut up, which brings me to the second part, which is upcycling. You can upcycle your clothes by changing them, you know, making a long sleeves shirt, a short sleeve shirt, dyeing it a different color, embellishing it with trims, but whatever it is, you know, becoming creative with it, transforming your old clothes into something new, which would be upcycling them. Then, of course, handing them down, giving them a second life, exchanging them, donating them to charity shops. When you buy new clothes, it's important to think about trying, again, secondhand clothes, like vintage clothes, going to the Salvation Army, borrowing clothes from a friend if it's for a special occasion, or a family member, possibly learning how to make your own clothes, or how to use a tailor. Use tailors again, choose your fabrics, make something especially for you. If you do shop locally and from small businesses, know the people you shop from, ask them questions. Forget about trends in general. You are the trend. You make your decisions. And educate ourselves and learn how to ask questions as we would for food and meat. Where does it come from? You know, where are my clothes made? What fibers are being used? How have they been produced? Is this being produced in my country, or is it coming from far away? You know, what's cotton, linen, how's all that? These new synthetic fibers, some of them are made from wood. You know, is this from sustainable foresting, or is this just, you know, chopping down the rainforest in the Amazon? Eco labels, you know, a lot of these things have eco awards. Check online if you are comfortable with those, you know, guidelines and policies of those eco labels. And lastly, really try not to invest into fast fashion, like big names like H&M or Zara. In certain cases, like athletic wear, sportswear is very difficult. Of course, if you want, a nice running shoe, there's probably no alternative, but try to be aware and conscious and ask questions. And that really concludes my little talk. So I hope I didn't overshare or bore anybody, but thanks for listening. It's my story.
Thank you so much, Theo. I love your story too. As a weaver and an artist, and having also created with you, I really understand so much of what you're talking about, and all of the input and creating the story and then trying to do it consciously. So I think that's really, really interesting aspect of your work. I would like to open up the discussion now.
Yeah, I'm just going to walk away from it. It's
I actually have a question. Lefteri, are you? There you are. Lefteri, I have a question for you first. I'm going to start off. I'm going to put it in the chat box. Is there any legislation on the horizon for like labeling fishing nets so that they can be traced? So that when they're found, a fisherman could be fined, or I don't know, there could be some sort of consequence.
Yeah, that's also a complex issue. Think that when a fisherman is losing his nets, usually he tries to recover them most of the time because the nets cost a lot of money. They're extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So when usually they cannot recover them, it's because of a storm, or because of they got tangled in a rock or something. But based on my experience, I believe that most of the nets don't come in the sea by accident. They come because most of the countries, including Greece, they don't have infrastructure to recycle these nets. So the local municipalities don't take them because they need to pay a fine in the landfill to bury them. So the most convenient solution for everybody is just that these nets disappear in the sea without costing any extra money. But regarding your question, yes, 2019 Greece passed a law about single-use plastic. And in that law, there is a regulation about fishing nets. That regulation hasn't been implemented yet, but it says that the producer of the nets, so let's say the company producing the nets, is responsible to making sure that the vast majority of these nets get recycled. And if they don't, they will pay a fine. So probably that legislation will start to be implemented in 2023, so next year. So I will keep you posted on that. But on a similar note, in Italy, for example, that we also have operations, until 2019, it was illegal for the fishermen to bring plastic from the sea to the land. They should discard all the plastic piece back in the sea. And the reason is what I told you, that the local authorities didn't want to recycle it or pay money to bury it in a landfill. And they're like, it's in the sea, it's not our problem, it doesn't cost anything. So this is we're trying to change that now. So probably we'll change in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Stacy, did you have a question?
Well, what I see is a digression here. One of the problems that we have with the pollution that's in the sea is that nobody owns it, okay? I go to the beach, as most of you know, almost every day when I can. I usually walk and swim. When I do my walk, of course, I will pick up every piece of plastic that I see and gather it and drop it off at our local recycling. And I oftentimes have a lot of people stopping me and asking me what I'm doing. And I say, well, I'm picking up the garbage, but are you responsible for this beach? And I say, well, I swim here every day and I don't want to swim with the garbage. So I think one of the problems that we have is educating people and making them much more aware of who's responsible for this. No, I didn't put it there. but it's in front of me now and I can pick it up. And I think programs with like what Leftetti is doing is great. They need to come into the grammar schools at the very youthful level. We already have, at least what I'm seeing here, quite a few activists that come to Mykonos with organized beach cleanups, but it has to be more than that. It also has to be, you know, you're careful with what you take to the beach to make sure that if the wind does blow it away, and the wind will blow it away, at least on my island, you know, if it goes into the water, it's not going to destroy the living elements that are within that water. So it's, you know, it's a big scale, and I think we have to touch people in a way that says to them, yeah, I own this too. This is part of me. This is mine. Whereas with Theo's proposal, it's much more intimate, isn't it? We look at our closet and, you know, the big issue we have summer to winter is, oh man, I have to switch everything over now. Can you imagine that we have so much stuff that it doesn't fit in one closet? We have to take it and put it on top, or we can have the stuff that's there for that season. And I think that's just an incredible thing. And I see it happening continuously, at least in Greece. I don't see it so much in the US and other countries, but certainly it's something that's very prevalent. So I guess my question for both of you is, to Leftetti, how can we get people to be aware that the sea is theirs, even though it doesn't have their name on it, it's theirs? And Theo, I liked your card. I screenshot it and we'll share it with others, because I think it's a great attitude of, do I need this? How much do I need, really? And, you know, when I'm making a purchase, how long is this going to last me? You know, is it going to be done by the next season?
Yeah. Theodore, maybe I start first and then you can follow up with your part of the question. So yeah, thank you very much for the intervention in the question. Well, I think, you know, the obvious answer is awareness raising and education. But I already think, you know, that most of the people, at least in the West, they know about the consequences that plastic are causing to the sea. So I believe the next step should be that we should have stricter law enforcement. Like if you throw your plastic, you know, in the coast, you get a fine. You know, there's no discussion over that. It's a fine. You know, that's something that you should have, like smoking in bars or something like that. So I believe that should be the first, and the second should be something like Theo is doing, like making people think on how they can use that plastic waste and generate new sustainable business models. How can you turn something from a waste to a resource? So I think that line of thinking can actually create a sustainable business model that the more you clean your island, the more sustainable clothing or products or anything that you make, you know, the more revenue you're going to create, like fixing the current business model, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we spoke about that briefly when we had our organizational call about this idea of creating from waste. And, you know, you also have to make sure that what you're creating is a needed product. Otherwise, you're spending a lot of energy recycling into another piece of consumption.
Yeah.
No?
And ideally, you should create a product that can be reused forever.
Right.
You know, like now we're discussing, and actually furniture products, like tables are made from the plastic we collect from the sea, and then if a piece of the plastic of that table is broken, then, you know, they just repair it and then you can have it all again. You don't have to throw it away. And we really need to think how to reuse the products. Like most of the plastic products, they're just used for a few minutes and then they end up in the landfill in the sea. You will be shocked to see what we find there. And actually, that's an interesting finding. Like, we fish a lot of clothes from the sea.
Wow.
A lot of clothes. So if you think that because you threw something out your door or in the street or anything, will go to recycling. The rain probably will throw it in the sea, and then hopefully we can fish it.
You know, you've both spoken about the real cost. Theo, I think you brought this up, the real cost of producing. And so whether it's the cost of recycling into something or producing, I mean, how do we get to the real cost? I mean, whether it's airplane flights or fashion, or, I mean, much of what we have and do and buy in life doesn't reflect the real cost anymore.
Yeah, and it's really difficult to gauge the real cost. I mean, I just like have a lot of, because things are really connected here. First, I was just gonna say to Lefteris that I think we should keep those clothes and do like a fabulous collection of like a runway show of all these clothes that have come from the sea, and do like a whole thing on that. That would be
We
great.
don't have enough storage for that.
Sea creatures.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Theodore is like too many. It's like piles and piles and piles and piles.
Crazy, right? I mean, I think there is, what I see is that there is a problem of value. Okay, so everything is so available, and things are starting to be less available now, and will probably become even less so as the world is just going through this, you know, moment right now with prices for certain things. And but apart from the price, it's just that people also don't really, you know, the society of consuming and buy this, you have to have this, and I'm producing it, and I don't want to have it in my warehouse. I want you to have it in your wardrobe, and eventually it's going to end up in landfill or the sea, right? We're just moving these products around. We're trying to make them available. We want to make people believe that they need them. Nobody stops and says, hang on a minute, somebody somewhere planted a seed, a plant grew, you know, loving care was involved, people, you know, machines also, but people, as in some cases, you know, had harvested this stuff. It ended up on our plates. It was spun into a yarn. It went through there. It traveled around the world. You know, stop and think and go, whoa, 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 hang on, all this is happening. And I'm just like putting it on so I can take one selfie and then throw it away, you know, or hop on a plane to go to some like stag do somewhere for a weekend. Like, this needs to stop. Like, we need to be able to see things and say, this is really beautiful. I want to understand, you know, what is going on. Like, we're just everything's so fast. Once you start looking into things and seeing things with different eyes and are able to appreciate again, because we've lost a lot of, like, you know, artisanry and handcraft. Like, Lefteris, you were just talking about the furniture. Like, there's people involved, you know, or there used to be jobs, like people used to fix stuff. Stuff wasn't made to just break down, so you have to buy a new one. You know, like, people now look at you and just like, well, there's a spare part, but it's going to cost you a little more if you buy a new unit. You know, we've all heard this a million times. I don't want to buy a freaking new unit. You know, I want the unit that I have, whatever it is, an air conditioning, you know, a rice cooker. I want that to last for as long as possible, you know? So I'm just hoping, and then that work is appreciated again as well. Somebody, a carpenter, somebody who paints a wall properly, you know, with the right paint or whatever it is. It's just like more value needs to go into these processes, I feel, for people to understand and appreciate stuff more and not need the quantity as much as the quality, maybe. I mean, that's my romantic, naive way of seeing things, but I just wish, you know, we were more conscious.
Well, Brady has brought up a question on the role of fashion in society, and I'm sure that has changed tremendously. I mean, here in Greece alone, you know, people had their wardrobes specially prepared for them, or at least women did, before getting married, and those were their lifelong good clothes. So I'm not sure what the role of the fashion industry is. Brady?
Yeah, just there was a time, my father's generation, where, you know, going to Brooks Brothers and buying your shirt, you paid a lot for it, but you knew that with a little care, it would last 20 years and the shirt would be recognizable. And there was a kind of positive message sent from having a Brooks Brothers shirt that was still good after 15 years. My perception is the modern high fashion industry does not actually aim at durability in any way. You know, it's make sure it is usable for only, you know, 3 wearings and then has to be given to the maid. Is there how do we rebuild the concept of that true high fashion is stuff that is really, really well made and expensive, but it also lasts forever and you never change it, but you give it to your kid. Is this possible, or are we in a society of billionaires who have to throw away their Brooks Brothers suit after 2 wearings?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question, and I don't have the answer or the solution. I mean, I know that it's more about desirability than durability for sure. Nowadays, there's a lot of brands that make very high quality stuff. Like, I'm not going to go and say Hermes doesn't do high quality stuff, because they do. That's like probably the one place you want to go to and buy a nice something that's been handmade in Paris, but and shirts, you mentioned shirts. Shirts have a yoke, that's a part of the back here that is there to give a little bit of stretch in the fit, but also to be exchanged when it's worn off, right? And the collar originally was meant to be, because that's the first part here at the back of the neck that wears off. You want to, that's there to take off, and so put a new one on and keep the rest of the body. So the Japanese use every single square inch of fabric, because it's all 36 centimeters wide, and the kimono uses up, there's no leftover. So the information is there. We know how to do this. It's all out there. We just kind of need to get away from having to have so many things for our self-importance or whatever it is, or we're so brainwashed, or it's difficult. But we kind of also need to have this, I can't expect me as a fashion designer, I love this stuff. I love art, I love fashion, I love artsy, but I can't expect everybody to be like so interested to know what is good quality clothes. We can't all be expected to know, all these things, because we'll go crazy. We do need to rely on, the higher, whatever it is out there, to implement certain policies to help us make those choices. But I really hope we can go back to that, Brooks Brothers shirt and not throwing it away. And also people who can't afford it, this is white privilege talking here, but it's again also for all of us to know a little bit how to mend and to know how to be resourceful with our clothes. Yes. And to learn how to fix them. My dad did know how to fix a buttonhole, and he was a successful businessman, and he used to fly to Rome or Paris with the Concorde from New York. But he knew how to, stitch a buttonhole or mend a tear in a shirt if he had to.
I think that's a really important, something really important that you've mentioned. A lot of people don't have the skill set anymore to do this. How many women, okay, I say women, but just because that was, sort of our purview. I sew. I know a lot of women on this call sew, but how many people do? Most of my friends, if I said, you should reverse the collar on your husband's shirt, or take it somewhere. Who is going to do that for you?
Yeah, people look at you and think you're crazy if you like,
Yeah, no, I resell
you want to do that
all the time, but it's an entire mindset, an entire industry that needs support. It's not just a question of all of us learning to reset the collars.
Yeah, and I remember having that conversation with Vivian Westwood, for example, when it was about opening flagship stores, and another flagship store in Shanghai and whatever, big, wonderful. And I said to her, listen, with all these messages you're putting out there, you shouldn't be opening flagship stores. You should be opening an alteration shop. That is a sustainable thing to do. Have your own fabrics and offer to repair the clothes that people bring in, put a little logo on it if you want, but that's an idea.
So we have another question here from earlier Neeks. It says, is it possible to make fishing nets and lines out of other materials besides plastic, a recyclable material? Or maybe you mean a material that breaks down naturally.
Yeah.
I think Stephanie's off the call now. That was Stephanie Nichols.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we can still hear about it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. Before the nylon fishing nets that they are now used, fishing nets were made from grass, actually, stuff. So, that's the main advantage of plastic in every part of our life. Plastic is very strong, plastic is very cheap. So, it makes much more sense financially to get plastic nets instead of from any other kind of material. And also a small parenthesis here about the degradable products. Well, actually, currently we consider them worse than simple products, because the problem we have with plastic is not that it doesn't break down. The problem we have with plastic in the environment is that it breaks down microplastic. And then all the living things, including humans, are eating that. This is the problem we have with plastic. That's why we don't have a problem with metal, for example. We fish also metal from the sea. We don't have a problem with that because it doesn't break down to micrometal. So if something is biodegradable, it means it's going to break down microplastic faster. So it's kind of a greenwashing thing, what Theodore spoke about earlier. So yeah, we can replace the fishing nets with another material, and I think the person that's going to find it will get a lot of money if he can replace or she can replace the fishing nets with a more sustainable material that's also the same price. Yes, it would be a huge innovation in the planet. But until then, I'm trying to control, my circle of influence, and my circle of influence is making sure these nets will be recycled, not like Greek recycling, but actually made into new products, into something sustainable. So yeah, I don't know if I covered that question.
Okay, thank you. Marion, you had a question.
First of all, I would like to congratulate both Lefteris and Theo, not only for the presentation, but for the inspiration they have brought to our lives, the point of light that they have added. And I should admit that I was very disappointed, very heartbroken with the facts at the beginning of Lefteris's presentation, with all this pollution and all this, the 500 kilograms, right, of rubbish collected from the sea. I just could not conceive that. Anyway, the question for Lefteris is whether the governments can sponsor such programs, or are they already sponsoring these efforts. That's for Lefteris. And for Theo, I would like to say, when I was a kid in school, we had a class that was in all girls' schools, actually, because there was segregated education back then when I was in Greek schools, that was called home economics. And we learned everything about fabrics, how to separate, the feeling of fabrics, and how to care for fabrics, and how to mend clothes and, sew the holes, or make buttonholes and sew the buttons on and make the hems and everything, apart from everything else that was sewing and stitching and needle pointing and knitting and everything. And I think this is gone. This art that brought so much beauty and creativity in our lives is lost. That is, wherever we had a hole here, we knew not only how to sew it, but sew a button on it, or a bow, and hide it, and wear the garment again and again, and never throw it away. When we grew taller, we would put down the hem, so we would, we would make it last. Is there anything we can do about it nowadays? Let's say, what is your opinion working in these islands? Could you set up teams to teach not only the textile industry, but these skills? Do you think that the municipality would be interested in setting up programs for young people? So that's the question for you.
How are we going to do it? So if there is answer.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can ask, because you have the larger question, and then I can answer later.
So this of course is a wonderful idea, and the fact that stuff like this is being taught at schools. I am of the opinion that recycling, understanding materials and how to recycle them should be taught at schools, you know, how to engage with waste. All this. Unfortunately, I feel like we have lost a lot of time because, as you said, it might have been very gender segregated and something that only girls were expected to learn because it was part of like a female agenda to know this sort of, you know,
Yeah,
art.
that was back then, though. Okay.
Back then, exactly. But it still, unfortunately, had this flavor of like then, you know, women stepped up and said, oh, hang on, no, we can do so much more. And it's like, it's not about that. It's about the economy that you mentioned of being able to look after yourself, that men might have learned at the military of how to iron their own pants, etc. But, and men's stuff. So I think the knowledge is out there. There's an incredible, you know, the internet is amazing. There's an incredible amount of information out there of how you can mend things in beautiful ways, in different ways, how different cultures deals with it. I can feel that there's a huge thirst for that knowledge. I see it difficult to approach, you know, municipal level to like, you know, what I can do is inspire people, which, you know, through our classes, we've started offering more than just weaving. We're going to start spinning. We've offered dyeing programs. So I feel like people want to know, people want to engage. So just to offer it or to maybe sort of pop up here and there and be available, very present with those ideas is like one thing I can do personally to try and make it. Luckily, I have a connection with the local art center in Mykonos. So I feel like people listen to me there and I can say, listen, I have this idea for this course. Is this something we should put out there and see if people are interested and would like to participate in? Of course, anything that goes beyond that, like making things part of like, you know, the local agenda, you know, that's probably out of reach, but definitely there is a platform for me here to be able
if there is an exhibition at the end of the classes, let's say, and everybody exhibits their own little work, that would be inspiration for you too. You're
Absolutely.
going to get ideas about the local, how you can incorporate local designs in your work, and it will be rewarding for them too. Just saying.
Yes.
I have a feeling that, I mean, I don't know, I may be totally off the mark here, but that, I mean, a lot of girls would consider this very retrograde, and not even the girls, but maybe a lot of the parents too. I mean, they want their girls to aspire to something else. And I mean, they aren't mutually exclusive is part of the problem. You can have these skills and still go on to be a lawyer and still be able to take care of yourself and your things. But I wonder if somehow this is one of those things that just sort of got left by the wayside because the value was not understood. It was seen only through a prism of women's development and not through, wait, let me see, there's a comment here. There's also the matter of time. As when women enter the workforce, there's little time left for hobbies like sewing, etc. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it's, you know, putting it as the level of hobby as opposed to life skill. I mean, we still have time to cook because we have to eat.
Right. And you know how everything went back to healthy eating habits and diets and cooking, and half of the programs on TV are about cooking when there is fast food restaurants outside and takeout, and everybody's going back to basics now. Why not with sewing and fabrics and, you know.
Hooray.
One of the things that I can say about the program that Theo is involved with here, as an outsider and seeing the reaction of the people who have been involved, it's considered an artistic outlet. And if we inspire people that way, that they can be creative by also picking up a few basic skills like sewing on a button or figuring out how to do a hem while they produce beautiful woven fabrics, which is one of the things that Theo was doing a couple of weeks ago with several of my friends. And, you know, they just went on and on about it. And one woman in particular, Dimitra Nazos, we had the conversation not too long ago. She said, Stacy, people don't know how to pick up needle and thread anymore. You know, they're amazed by this jewelry that I make with fabric. She makes beautiful dolls and so forth. And they're amazed that I can do this. And it's just needle and thread and my imagination, you know, bits and pieces of fabric. So I think, Marion, what you're talking about is not so much a municipal say, okay, you guys have to do this, but programs are offered to inspire people to be artistic, and they will pick up those skills whether they want to or not, because it's part of the work that they're going to do.
Right. But can I say one thing about labeling it as artistic? I mean, I'm a weaver, and I have to say that, okay, well, first of all, the first time I threw a shuttle, it was like I was sent back to like Cro-Magnon man, like in my brain. It was like, oh my God, I'm creating shelter, like architecture based on shelter. I mean, this all comes from putting plants together, weaving them. So it's actually a really, I think it's a very deep, deep thing for people to learn. And
Archaic.
I don't think yes, archaic would be the word. I don't think we should, I think it's wonderful that it's labeled as art, but it needs to go further, because it's like eating. I mean, we have to eat, and we need to take care of ourselves.
If we can hold the carrot out somewhere, though, to
Yeah.
motivate them to get on the bandwagon, and then they'll follow.
Yeah.
The carrot, in a way, for me, or what I learned in these courses, is like the necessity for people, or the need for people to come together and be creative together, to watch each other make stuff, inspire each other, gossip, talk. It's wonderful.
It was psychotherapy once for women. It was psychotherapy. They all stood at the entrance of their houses. I remember that. I have the picture of the village.
Yeah.
Out, each woman was in their own yards, and the other one was across the street in her outside her own door, and they all talked, across the street. they also took care of their own art. I mean, they mended things.
That was their job. That was their job. They weren't lawyers all day long, going to the court and then running and then working in the evening.
They weren't lawyering.
You take one course and you're really excited about it. You make something and it's there, you've got it. But then you go back to work and you go to Zara's and pick up something because you got to have something to wear to court or wherever you work.
Right. But I think, yes, Karen, you're right. And I think that's where the real cost comes in, because these conveniences are necessary in the life today, but I don't think we're paying the real cost for them. There's a whole chain of events leading up to that product. And all along the way, it is being subsidized by what, by how, I don't know. But like you posted something on Facebook about the increase in plane fares. And it said something in the article about, oh, the CEO is just getting more money. Well, actually, maybe we're going to have to just start paying the real cost for things. And it's not $19.99 to fly from Berlin to Thessaloniki, right?
Amen.
And it's not a $10 t-shirt from Zara. It has a huge footprint. So maybe we had to pay the real cost.
It's the problem also of efficiency. I feel like the fishing nets, we're talking about nylon fishing nets, durable, quick, more fish turnover. Everybody can eat fish cheaply, courthouse, running thing. I don't need to look after myself. But what happens if this collapses? What happened in Mykonos when the pandemic kicked off? Everybody was freaking out. There is nothing else to rely on other than the tourism. It's like, what do? We haven't got anything else to do. We're going crazy. It's like, well, that's a pity, because, the more we can do and the more we know, the more of a thing we have to fall back on. I don't know. That's the only way.
I want to get to
it's going to sound funny to you, but when the economic crisis hit Greece, then people were starting, saying to one another, τώρα οι γυναίκες θα αρχίσουν να ράβουν τα βρακιά τους και τις κάλτσες τους. Από την αρχή, because until now, every time, someone had a ripped piece of underwear or stockings and nylons, they threw it away. Then they started mending again. Because there was no money. So it's really.
Sometimes you're forced to, yes.
So we have two questions in the chat here, Lefteris. These are both yours. I don't know if you've read them.
But I have asked Lefteris something, and
okay. What was your question?
There was a question for Lefteris.
The first
before I asked you. So
yeah, to answer that question very briefly, no worries. No, we're not financed by the government. we could be financed by the government or some government, but we don't base our operations on that. We are privately funded on what we are doing.
Okay,
So all these
Lefty.
votes and all these efforts are private initiative.
Yeah, all of it is private initiative. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Randall,
So Marion, are you talking about something like ESPA that are like the private companies that qualify for ESPA funding? Is that what you're kind of talking about for Lifteri?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There are more also initiatives like in Marseille, the Greek Prime Minister committed to removing 30% of the plastic from the Greek seas and also protecting, I don't know how much, 40% of the Greek seas. So this is something that we are already doing. So the EU is going to finance Greece for that. But yeah, I don't have very high hopes on getting any kind of funding. I'm not in that kind of networks, but we keep on operating with our own way. If something happens, it would be nice to have, but we don't base our existence or our work on governmental support.
Thank you.
So Lefty, I want to get to these two questions that we have here. One is from Randall, and it's, can those who buy fishing nets be charged a deposit like beverage bottles and be refunded the deposit when bringing it back to the point of purchase for upcycling?
Yeah, that's really an excellent question. So hopefully this is what's going to happen, like with that law about single-use plastic I mentioned earlier. They're going to pay an extra fee, which will be the deposit, and if they manage to arrange the recycling of the nets, they will get the money back. So yeah, hopefully this is going to be implemented all over Europe. And now after the agreement in Nairobi, probably United States as well. So fingers crossed that this will be implemented soon. Because, in the end of the day, this is going to help it. Like, think if your plastic bottle, if you would get a deposit back of like $1 for every plastic bottle you use, you wouldn't throw it in the street or the sea, like it would make sense to bring it back. So yeah, hopefully this will be implemented with the fishing nets.
Okay, and we have one more question, and it's, do you have contact with Konstantin Alexander? This is Karen. Maybe you want to pose it yourself. I see you're online.
Well, just that it occurs to me that there are a number of people who have done things that would dovetail with what you're trying to do. So do you know Konstantin? And if you do, he might have some advice still. He's kind of backed away from being very active, but there's that. There's also for Theo, the Dorostratu costume collection. Have you done it? Have you visited it? There's like thousands of original, some of them are original costumes that they got from villages 50 years ago. Others that they make now to replicate those costumes for the dance company. But if you haven't done it, that's another resource for ideas and braid and handiwork. And they have kendama classes and headdress classes and things that you could pick up on there too. I'm sure there's others.
Great. Well, listen, guys, we've been online for over an hour and a half. It's been a wonderful discussion. I want to thank you guys so much. I've put in the chat a link for Earth Day. It's a toolkit for getting involved, about what you can do. A lot of it is about what you can do in your community, which are things that Lefteris and Theo have both highlighted, in terms of a call for action, what we can do, how we can be useful. So check it out and see if there's something that looks like could be useful for you. I guess I could screen share and show it to y'all now, but because it's late, I'm gonna let y'all look at it on your own. Karen Lee is saying ECCC Earth Day Rally, Zoom, April 25th, Bill McGibbons et al. Okay, yeah. We also have that's Democrats Abroad.
That's Democrats Abroad, yeah.
Earth, wait, what is the name of what does it stand for? Climate Crisis.
The Environmental and Climate Crisis Council.
Right.
which comes in with the DNC, Climate Council, and others. So it's just, this one is just kicking off now, one of the
Okay.
caucuses.
Well, look out for that, guys. You can attend. Okay, thank you. All of our documents that we've used, all of our resources are on the Google Docs. There is one page that says resources. So if you're interested in seeing those resources that we've drawn from or that we've posted on Facebook, just send your email to us and we'll give you access to that file. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Lift Daddy,
you.
Theo, thank you. Sarah Jane, fantastic as always.
Can I just say, this is my cup of Joe's 2012 Columbus. I'm pretty sure this is from China. 2004 Olympics sewn in with a very nice sweatshirt, plaka, Greek made. This is Greek. I think it's even older than the sweatshirt.
You are my hero, Karen Lee.
You are my hero, Theo, because I'm going like, I'm the one who said, oh, look, somebody under 70 is doing this. Oh, yes.
So uplifting, really.
And I didn't dress up special for this show. I just want you to know it's what I wear around all the time.
Now you're putting
Yeah,
us
that's how
to
we
shame.
do it.
All right,
You
so
know,
on that,
Theo,
I will.
Theo, my 20-year-old niece came to me and said, could you please put this thread into the needle because I want to sew something. So I look at it and say, why can't you put it through the hole? She said, because there is no hole, it's just a head. I said, you have a pin there. That's not even a needle. I mean, she was trying to twist the thread around the
That's so
pin.
cute. Everybody's gonna start.
So much contact with real life. I mean,
I think we need a skill set here.
yeah, if
right.
a war breaks out, I think we're all going to starve. We don't know how to hunt an animal, to skin it, to
I
cook.
do.
Okay,
Hey,
you do.
I
guys.
can't do it, but I know how to do it.
I mean,
We
we're
have-
completely helpless. We're hopeless.
I think we're gonna have to have another Kafeneion dedicated to home economics,
Exactly. It's getting animal.
Excellent.
where we all bring our needle and
You know,
thread.
if you look for someone to teach Velonaki,
Yeah.
to come to Mykonos.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
All right, guys, I'm
Definitely.
seeing that Daniela Addis has just signed on. I'm sorry that we're just finishing up, but I'd like to, Daniela, can you just give an introduction of yourself? I think you and Lefteri definitely need to be in touch. You're both UNEP-MAP associated. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hello?
Hi,
Hi.
Daniela's calling in from Italy.
Yes,
right.
I'm sorry to be so late, but I was in another meeting actually. So we are having a very stressed schedule in this time as ever anyway. Yes, I'm very glad actually, and I will be very glad to know you a little bit better, and not only today, but in the next future. I'm a legal expert, let's say, so dealing with marine and coastal areas, especially from the legal point of view, but also from the governance and political point of view, since more than 20 years. Yes, something like that, almost 25 years. And working especially in the Mediterranean area, Barcelona Convention, but also other convention, international convention, lately with the ESPO Convention on Transboundary Environmental Impact Assessment and Strategic Environmental Assessment. And also teaching from time to time in university, masters, marine protected areas, dealing with environmental association, sea and environmental association, etc., etc., etc. Many things anyway.
Okay, Daniela, I'm really sorry. You would have had so much to add to this conversation on a very professional level. But we hope that we'll see you again another time. And I will put you in contact with Lefteris directly via email. Yeah,
That's great. That's
Okay.
great. It will be
I
also
think
very
your
nice.
works converge.
That's great. It will be very nice. Maybe we can manage some meeting next days.
Yeah, sure. I'll write to you. And if you want to see our discussion, we will be putting it up online in the next few days. So I will alert you to when it's there and you can tune in and hear what we spoke about.
That would be great. Excellent. Excellent.
Great.
Is it possible to have the record of this
Yes.
meeting?
Yes, I will send it to you. Yeah.
That's
soon
great.
as I get it.
All right.
All right,
right.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you again so much. And we really appreciated Theo and Lefteris this whole evening. It was really wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It has been a